Today is the 22nd of November 2016. I'm David Wegener, and this is the second week of my free tuition on the internet. Now, I wonder, do people think it's good to be free? Because maybe they think it's worthless then. But I think differently about free things. I quite like free things. In fact, some of my free things have sent me all the way to Australia for a trip on a plane. But anyway, I'm not going to get into that. But I'm now going to talk more and more about pawns. Now, they are so important. Without them, all the pieces can just about attack each other, and so they're necessary. So if the pawns aren't in the way of the pieces, the queens can take each other, the rooks can take each other for free. And so it makes quite a mad sort of array of sort of a crazy position. But anyway, that brings me to the one of the pawns that I think that sometimes pawns can be crazy with a K. Crazy. Okay, and then there's also the attacking pawns. Now, I can't just demonstrate what attacking pawns look like on the board, but I can show you what some pawns are like on the board. Now I'll just set up the white position, and I'll be demonstrating instead, because I've got no preference for colour, I will demonstrate these amount of pawns to my best of my knowledge, which is pretty reasonable because I have actually won a long, about 100 and something years ago, I won the New Zealand Speed Lightning Chess Championships in 1989. Now, that's a long time ago, but people were saying to me, be proud of it. And even my strong chess friends that are better than me, and FIDE Masters and International Masters and all that sort of thing, are saying to me, be proud of it, you won it. And it takes a long time to accept that praise, and I now accept it. And that's what I'm, as I've mentioned, primarily good at. Now I'm going to show you, these two pawns are in black centre, okay, and they're classed by chess players once you get to learn what the terminology is. Because it's terminology we're talking here. You don't need to know whether or not these are hanging pawns or not, but they're called hanging pawns. And that's because they've only got two and no buddies on the sides. Okay, so they've only got two, so they're called hanging pawns. This is called an isolated pawn. It's on, and I'm not saying that there's not other pawns on the board, but I'm just demonstrating what an isolated pawn is. Now, there's all sorts of things about the strengths and weaknesses of hanging pawns, and there's strengths and weaknesses of isolated pawns, etc. So there's always good points and bad points about certain, even bad moves. There's good points about it because it might make your opponent go, what? What do I do now? Or it could be a simple move, or it could be a king move, a quiet move, and it could just perplex one's opponent to make a mistake or do something else. Whereas a computer of now date will pounce on you if you make a mistake, even on move 1 or 2. It'll just get an advantage quite quickly. So here's an isolated pawn. Now, if you can imagine that, not that this is a good situation, but if there's pawns like this, then this is a nice place for a piece, because no pawns can come and tell it to go away. Okay? So no pawns can push if the pawns are like this. So this is what's called an outpost. Now, the outpost of this knight is supported by the pawn on e5. And the outpost here in question is on white's f4, which is the square it's called anyway. It's not black's f5, from F5. It's not F5, it's F4. So every square on the chessboard, unless you turn the board around and all that sort of stuff, without going into details, is a certain name for that square, and it doesn't change, even though white might be playing over from this side and black might be playing. These the squares denote from white's A1 on the left and white's H1 on the right. So even if the letters aren't on the board, that's still the case, always for white, and whereas black is A8 and H8 and etc. Anyway, there is an isolated pawn, and that's one of the advantages, but the weaknesses are different. But one of the advantages of an isolated pawn is you can utilize the diagonals from them as a support in some cases, but not all. Not especially if the pawn attacks here. If it was able, it can't go backwards, of course, but if it was moving from here to here, then it can tell the knight to go away, and there's no outpost on F4 anymore. But that, just because it tells the knight to go away in chess doesn't mean it has to, and that sort of thing. So it's not a foregone conclusion that the knight has to remove itself just because it's been poked with a pawn, attacked with a pawn, which, by the way, is looked upon as 1 point the pawn, and a knight is 3 points, or whatever, as a general guideline. And it's not an absolute value system, but it's a guideline. It's a general guideline. It's not something that you can write home and say that knight's worth 3 points and the pawn's only worth 1, because if the pawn is on the 7th rank, then it can either turn into a queen, not a king, not a pawn. Once it reaches the 8th rank, it becomes a surpassed pawn, as I've already said. If it reaches the 8th rank, white in this case is having to, by the laws of chess, which I've just learnt about 7 months ago, it is the responsibility of the player promoting the pawn. This is the rules of chess. It is the responsibility of the player promoting the pawn to grab the piece, even if they're in time trouble, and put it on the square. But if the opponent is holding the pieces back, then it becomes an issue for the director of play, or arbiter, or referee, or whatever you want to call him, the director of play, DOP, blah, blah, blah. It's up to the referee of him or her to determine a result to the altercation. So this pawn, when it reaches the 8th rank, changes its identity. And same for black. If black reaches a pawn on the 8th rank, it changes its identity to either A, a queen, B, think outside the square, bishop, or think outside the square again. The pawn can promote to a knight and think outside the square again. It can also exchange itself for a rook of its same colour, of course. In transfer chess, by the way, which is 2 boards next to each other, white and black and white, as teams play against each other, which is very popular, you can't promote pawns. So in transfer chess, you can put a pawn on the back rank 50 times in the game, but it doesn't mean that it's going to turn into a queen and a rook, or a knight, or a bishop. And it can't turn into a king, sadly. The amount of times I'd like to be able to king a pawn would be a fantasy, but not that sort of fantasy. Anyway, so those sorts of pawns. So you've got hanging pawns, and they've got, as I said before, they've got similar to an isolated pawn, or any sort of pawn at all. They can create an outpost for a knight like this. You know, if the pawns are hanging, and these are the pawns are here and here,